Call the Mount Olive Town Council meeting for February 17, 2015 to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence for our men and women serving in the military. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act, please?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204, Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Here.
Mrs. Laybow.
Here.
Mr. Mania. Mr. Perkins. Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mr. Nicastro.
Here. Let the records reflect Mr. Perkins is not feeling well, so he's home this evening, and Mr. Mania is away. We're going to go a little bit out of order than what's on the agenda. We're going to move up. The first item for discussion is going to be the bond refunding savings, I think with Brian Bradley and Matt Jessup. Just state your name and for the record, please.
Sure. Matt Jessup from McManaman, Scotland and Bauman, your bond counsel. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Right before the meeting started, Councilman Roman said to me, well, when bond counsel shows up, that usually means you guys are going to cost us money. And while ordinarily it may be the case, in this case, we're actually here to save you money. So the township has an opportunity to conduct a debt service savings refunding on some of its currently outstanding debt. I know some of you have been through this before, but I'll briefly take you through the procedure, the process, and then Brian Bradley from RBC Capital Markets is also here to talk about the market, the economy, and what your savings look like. So going back to 2005 and 2006, the township had issued various series of bonds. 2005 were actually refunding bonds, so you've done this process certainly once before. And 2006 were new money bonds to finance general capital projects and water utility projects. Those bonds, when they were issued in 05 and 06, bore interest at rates of 3%, 4%, 5% interest. Today's rates are dramatically lower than that. So the township has an opportunity to issue new bonds. There's a bond ordinance for your consideration tonight that would authorize the issuance of those bonds, the proceeds of which would be used to pay off your old bonds, the 2005 and 2006 bonds, and the new bonds would bear interest at a dramatically lower interest rate. So the difference between the debt service on your new bonds at low interest rates and the debt service on your old bonds at high interest rates is the savings that the township will see in every year for, I believe it's 7 years, the next 7 years in this case. The authorization process to get the refunding fully authorized in place consists of a refunding bond ordinance. Again, you have that before you for introduction tonight. That ordinance is adopted the same way as any other capital bond ordinance, introduction, public hearing, final adoption, 20-day estoppel period. The ordinance is fully effective. The night when you hold your public hearing and final adoption on the refunding bond ordinance, we'll ask you to also authorize what we call a form and sale resolution. This is a resolution that sets certain additional parameters of the bond sale. Most notably, it appoints the underwriter, the firm that's going to be hired to go out and sell the bonds out into the marketplace. And it delegates to your chief financial officer, among others, the ability to award the bonds on the sale date. We do that because, as you'll hear from Brian, obviously these refunding deals are market sensitive. You want to get in on a day when the market is great, when the news is good, when rates are at their optimum, so we can achieve the highest savings possible. To do that only on a night of a council meeting when you all meet, obviously limits the number of days in which we can go off and sell the bond. So the form and sale resolution authorizes to the CFO the ability to award those bonds so we can quickly strike when the market is at its best. Those are the two authorization proceedings that we'll ask the township to consider, and at that point the refunding is fully authorized and ready to go. In the meantime, while you're undertaking that process, we will be working with the underwriter and with your other professionals, your auditor, your general counsel, on getting ready for the sale. preparing a disclosure document, an official statement, working with the rating agency on a rating for the township, and going through the other procedures and steps necessary to get the bonds ready to go into the market so that Brian can go out and sell them and lock in those savings. Once we sell the bonds on a sale date, your savings are essentially locked in at that point. We'll know exactly what they are per year, both in on the general capital side and the water utility side. And then we'll move to a closing about 3.5 weeks later. At this point, unless you have any questions for me, I'd ask Brian to maybe talk about the market and the specifics of the savings that you can expect or we all hope to achieve in connection with the refunding.
Ms. Leba?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know if this is for you or for Brian. This is very time sensitive because the market can change at any time. Is that correct, how that works? So we have to act as quickly and reasonably as possible. And is there also if I remember from the last time, is there a certain percentage that you have to be within, like in order to?
Sure. So, and Brian can get into the details, but under state law,
Right, the state.
Yes, under state law, there is a threshold, a percentage threshold savings. It's a net present value savings. You take the amounts of money in each year that you'll save. Let's say it's $30,000 a year in each year that you're going to save. Those savings get present valued into today's dollars. All of your savings that you hear Brian talk about are net of all of the costs to do this deal in the first place. So there's no added bill at the end. All of the savings are net of all the professional costs, et cetera. And then that savings number, as a percentage of the 05 and 06 bonds that we're taking out, that percent needs to be at 3% or higher.
Okay.
I believe this deal is closer to 4.4% or so.
That was going to be my next question.
You are under current market conditions, you are what I would call well in excess of the 3% present value savings, which again, from a state law perspective, means you can go ahead without going to local finance board. For what it's worth, the national GFOA has said 3% is the threshold. And if you are a Board of Ed in New Jersey and you had 3% savings, you're required by law to do the refunding or you risk losing your state aid. So 3% is the number. You're at about, I think it's 4.5, roughly 4.4%
Oh, good.
net present value as of today. So you're above that
Excellent.
threshold that you were thinking of.
Good, thank you.
You have any other questions? None, thank you.
Brian Bradley from RBC Capital Markets. I provided a quick, a short little handout, 3 pages, and what I wanted to do was just give you a snapshot of the market so you could see why this opportunity is present today, and then go into the part you really care about, which is the bottom line savings. So first page, this is just a snapshot of the AAA MMD. The municipal bond market, much like the treasuries, rates change every day. So this deal, until we actually price it and lock it in, it's still subject to interest rate risk on a daily basis. What the MMD is, and the AAA MMD, that's your gilt edge credit. And much like you have with a mortgage or any credit, issuers trade from that AAA. So your AAA are your state of Delaware, state of Maryland, your gilt edge credits. The township has an excellent rating at AA. It'll be very close to those AAA scales. And I just draw your attention to the graph, AAA MMD January 1st, 2007 to present. And what I want to draw your attention to is the peaks. The 30-year was about a 6% in late 2008. The 10-year was about a 5% in late 2008. Currently at this time, we're about half of that. So the 30-year is roughly a 3%. The 10-year is roughly a 2%. We're actually closer to the all-time lows. The all-time low for the 30-year was a 248 actually in November 2012. We're very close to those bottoms. That bottom, hence the opportunity for the township to save money. We have seen a slight increase in rates over the past 2 weeks. It's mostly been on the long end. The township's debt is very short that we were refinancing. The final maturity is in 2021. And really that short end of the curve, it only goes out 6 years. We haven't seen a wild swing, although we have seen higher interest rates. So the savings I'm going to show you will be a little bit less. But again, until we lock it in, I don't know what the schedule calls for, probably about March.
We can't close until May because of the advancement fund.
Okay.
Funding, so we'll probably price it in April.
Okay. So we still have interest rate risk until we lock in the savings. The second page, I'm not going to belabor a lot of this page. I'll just draw your attention to the bottom. This is a proxy what we use in the bond market for borrowing, and this is the borrowing over 20-year for a AA credit. It's a index that's put out every Thursday. It's put out on a weekly basis by the bond buyer. And as you can see from the bottom, today's 3.6% level is lower than roughly 90% of the time. So it's a very accommodative market for issuers to either refinance or borrow for new money. And then the last page is the page you care about greatly. It's the bottom line savings. And I'll just draw your attention over to the box on the right, the cash flow savings. The first column is the fiscal year date. The prior debt service, that's if you don't refinance, these are your annual payments of the callable bonds on a fiscal year basis. The refunding debt service, that's if we were to price it and lock it in today, this would be the approximate debt service. And simply the savings column is the difference of those two. So you could see the first year there's $20,000 in savings and goes up as high as $30,000 in savings. We structure them on a uniform basis. The aggregate cash savings are approximately $197,000. The present value is $187,000. And to answer your question, that $187,419 divided by, as Matt had alluded to earlier, the $4,244,000 that we're refinancing is approximately 4.4% in present value savings. So it's well in excess of that 3% benchmark that Matt had referred to. And again, I think when we last sent the update February 2nd, the savings were about $10,000 greater. So we've lost a little ground, but we still have some work to do before we enter the market. So the numbers will change on a daily basis. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Roman?
So if I'm correct in reading this, the annualized savings is going to be averaging around $23,000 a year for the next 7 years, correct?
Correct.
Nowhere on here does it show the cost of doing this. Do you
My
know?
estimated cost of issuance, and I'll walk you through the box on the left. The sources and use of funds, the bond par amount, plus the premium, are total proceeds of $4,463,000. That premium, we're in a very, very low interest rate environment. Investors actually are paying a premium for bonds, and it's why they would like to pay that premium. They pay up front for a higher coupon, so they pay more than par. And the reason why they pay up in this market is because most investors think interest rates are going to go up, and they'd rather have that. They'll pay more than $1, and they'd rather have that higher coupon so that as money comes in, as you pay your semi-annual interest payments, they reinvest those funds in what they hope to be a higher market, hence the premium for total proceeds of $4,463,000. My refunding escrow deposit is $4,370,000, and my estimated cost of issuance is the next line item. Right now, estimated cost of issuance are $91,375, which is well below what I think is in the ordinance, and that's just to be conservative.
So it's going to cost $91,000 approximately to save $187 over the next 7 years.
Correct.
And that $187 does not include the $91,000.
It's net of all the
Okay, so it's
savings on
net.
the right, the $197,000. That's net of all the costs.
That's all I have.
Anyone else? Nope. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys can sit up.
Joe?
Yes. Listen, we got
Sherry, I just have one more question for it. The last time we did this, how much did we say? Was it what's the comparison between?
I'll have to look, Colleen. I think we did one in 11 was the last time we did it. So
Yeah.
I'll go back and look. I have to tell you too, the cost of issuance, that's, to me, that's high because we've done a couple of refundings and we've been nowhere near that. So that's just an FYI for me to you.
Mhm.
I'll look at the 11 refunding and let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sherry, what was our cost of issuance last time, do you?
I'll look it up, Alex. Yeah, I'll
Sure,
sure.
I have that. I can email it to you.
Do you have it,
I
Brian?
do.
Okay, that's
Not
great.
with me. I can email it to you.
Okay, that's
in the
great,
morning.
yeah.
Right,
Mine-
and I would just clarify that is an estimate in the numbers without actually gathering the specifics. So that part of the next step will be to call the rating agency. On a $4.5 million refunding, your price is X. to talk to your auditor. Your price is Y. I agree too that $70,000 for the professionals is likely high by a good amount of money. And obviously that would just transfer into lower bonds issued, more savings. But it is just an estimate, just to run numbers and to give you guys a sense of what the savings looks like.
And the estimate is plus or minus what?
I'm sorry?
You said the cost of issuance is just an estimate. Is that you're capping it?
I would suggest to you that it would only, that the $70,000 number would only go down.
You mean the
For-
91,000.
91.
Well, I'm sorry, the underwriter's discount number is more of a fixed number, so I was focused on the 70. The 21,000, right, the $91,000 is 21,000, which is effectively what we call underwriter's discount, the fee to the underwriter to do the job of selling the bonds out to the public. That is largely a fixed number. The 70,000 is an estimate of the costs of us, your auditor, your rating agency, your printer, your general counsel, and any other professionals involved in the transaction.
Now, as
Those costs will be itemized, and that number will not be $70,000. It will be a lesser number.
And if by lesser, 10% less, 5%? Do you have, based on your experience?
I would say $10,000 less.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
All right, thank you.
Next on the agenda, we're going to discuss the proposed Mount Olive splash pad.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we spoke about back in December, during the initial concept plan for the splash pad, I promised council to come back in January, February with the engineer's estimate. Before you is the engineer's estimate, and we've been working with any number of professionals from the Vortex State bid contract through, any projects such as this. There are a lot of components that go into it, between the electrical conduit. There's the need for restroom, plumbing, sewer. I think Jill's here as well, if she wanted to chime in. But mainly for council consideration is a go or no-go question before you. As we've spoken about in December, this, as I always say, I'm the quarterback. If you call the play, I run it. So what we have in front of council is certainly the design is beautiful. It enhances Turkey Brook Park. It would be rated adjacent to Mount Playmore, which we see as a phenomenal success. I think the mayor might have just stepped out of the room. I don't know if he wants to chime in on this or not. But in front of you is Gene's estimate for costs, and open it for discussion.
Mr. Roman, the total costs that are in here, is that soup to nuts everything, or is that a possibility it might bump up?
It's an estimate, as with anything, and I agree with Mr. Jessup. I always tend to under promise and over deliver. You never know when it comes to construction costs. You always kind of fix in a 20% change cost. Now that worst case scenario, you anticipate 20% more costs. More often than not, that does not occur on project management. But again, you never know.
Yes, I know.
There's issues up in Turkey Brook Park. There's certainly a lot of ledge rock up there. We know that. So you may run into that. You may not. Again, nothing's foolproof. We asked the engineer to give his best estimate based upon his experience and training, and this is the number he came up with.
And what do you anticipate the project length? When do you anticipate it would be completed?
Now,
Middle August.
Middle August?
Middle August. I know, we would like to have had it done. One of the things that we learned in terms of Mount Playmore is that it's very difficult to dedicate our men to the project, which is one of the reasons that the costs associated with the splash pad are going to be a little bit higher than what we did at Mount Playmore. Because at this point we're going to have a general contractor and subcontract out the work. There is a cost associated with having our guys doing the work. It is that there is a lessening of other services that are provided throughout the town. As you know, it is my plan not to run a beach program anymore at Bud Lake Beach for many reasons. Number one being attendance is so low there that it just doesn't make financial sense to continue with that program. This splash pad really is a happy medium between actually putting in a municipal swimming pool, which is incredibly expensive to install, to run, and I'm not sure needed within the township in light of surrounding towns such as Hackettstown and Chester having municipal pools. as well as the Flanders Valley Swim Club, also as an option to people who are looking for a local avenue to go swimming. The splash pad, in conjunction with Mount Playmore, will make Turkey Brook Park an incredible facility during the summer months. And also, let's not forget that the splash pad will be turned into a ice skating area during the winter months. So essentially, we're going to be getting 10 months worth of usage out of this particular facility. I've looked at it in a number of different ways. I think it's an expenditure which is well worth the money, and I'm imploring all of you to support the project.
Mr. Roman?
Have there's been any consultation with the police department as far as like a traffic study, what they anticipate the increased amount of traffic over at Turkey Brook and how that would impact the rest of the use in the park?
I can tell you that at this point, we have not had a traffic study done, but we did talk about what we would expect in terms of usage of the park, and it was not a number that was, in the beginning, there will be a significant usage of the park over what we have now. But overall, Recreation felt that the numbers would be consistent with total usage of the park. I forget exactly how it was explained, but it wasn't something that maybe 100 kids per day using the splash pad. It wasn't a number that ultimately was going to require a traffic study by the police department. In the beginning, yes, when it's new and it's novel, there will be an incredible usage of the park. And Jill, that's pretty much consistent with what we had discussed, correct?
Yes.
Because we had actually looked at whether or not we needed, one of the things that I wanted to do was take a look at whether or not we wanted to build a bigger park. But when the costs came in and we talked about what the potential use of the facility would actually be, we made a determination that what we're really seeking to do is the right size and the right usage for that area. And I think, you know, anyone who's got young kids, this is going to be the spot where they're going to want to go, because it's going to be a combination of both an incredible dry playground at Mount Playmore and a water facility for the kids. And I can tell you that I have not heard one person complain about what we did up at Mount Playmore. It's been a complete success. I expect that the splash pad will also add to that.
I mean, I'd like to continue to say that the cost is not something I'm extremely happy with, but I think this is something that would be an extreme addition to the park. It would be a great value to not only residents of Mount Olive. I think it would get great use, and for what it ends up, it's going to end up costing us in the long run. I think the benefits outweigh, and I'm definitely going to be supporting this, even with the increased cost.
Mr. Amianda?
One of the things that we're going to be looking to do, actually, because we are very concerned about the cost of the project, and Sean and I have talked about actually going out to bid for different aspects of the project to take it outside the scope of the number which you've been given. One of the big areas of this is the pouring of the concrete. We were very successful in terms of Mount Playmore. This number includes us not going outside. We will look at bidding out the concrete aspect of the project, and there could be a substantial savings there at the end of the day. There may not be, and we have to plan for the complete cost of the project, but we will be looking to save money wherever we can, while at the same time not in any way making the project any lesser of a great project.
Mr. Amianda and Ms. Lebo?
Mr. President, I am for the splash pad, but I want to know, is the money in the budget? And if the money is in the budget, where do you plan to get the money? Because I don't know if the town is ready to go and borrow it this year, or we could defer it to another year.
Well, defer to...
I can tell you that based upon where we are with the budget, the increased cost of this year's budget is de minimis in terms of the cost of what the splash pad is going to be adding to this year's budget. I believe the number is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 or so, the additional cost. Oh, $25,000. $25,000 in terms of what it's going to add to the budget. In light of where we are in terms of our funds, it's really a non-issue. The bigger issue is the cost of borrowing the money over the length of the project. So whatever the capital project is, it's the cost that we're going to be paying back over a number of years. The question really becomes, in my mind, whether or not this is a project, regardless of whether it's $700,000 or $600,000, whether it's worth spending the money on the project in the first instance. Because it doesn't really matter over 30 years or 20 years, whatever the capital term is, what the cost. I mean, if we're paying back $10,000 a year or $20,000 a year for this particular project, is it worth spending the money on that project? It's not how much more it's going to cost this year, but whether or not the project in and of itself is worth doing. And I suggest that based upon where we are as a community and what we have to offer and what we need, that this is a project which is worthwhile spending money on. We're not doing any other real capital improvements this year. This is the one capital improvement that I'm looking to do. It replaces something that we're taking out of our repertoire, if you will, in terms of the services that we provide at the beach. And in the long run, it will improve the value of everyone's property, because Mount Olive will be a desirable place to live based upon the facilities that we have in town and the services that we provide.
Ms. Leybow, did you have?
You finished?
Or Dan?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to say that the splash pad is fun for people of all ages, Mayor, young, old, senior, me included. And I want to say that also the cost for installing this splash pad, I would have to think that it's probably not paying for the beach and the staff at the beach. It'll probably just really cancel each other out. You know, I mean, it's not like we're adding more money into the budget. We might even realize some savings there. But the next question I have is, and I hate to ask this question, but I really need to, what kind of costs are we going to have for maintenance each year? What are we looking at in that direction?
Jim, do you have that number?
We haven't been provided with hard numbers yet from the vendor Vortex. They're still working on the design phase. We do know that typically what we're going to need is some chlorine additive to treat the water. There will be the filtration system will need some upkeep. Very similar, what it's going to become is an extension of our water and sewer. A lot of these materials are similar to what Michael Lotta uses in the water and sewer department. So we're going to realize there's a purchasing savings through that. I don't have exact numbers. When I get those, I will absolutely forward them to administration and council. The only other associated cost is going to be maintaining staff that are certified pool operators, because we do have to understand how the chemistry of the system works. So those are the only associated costs with this. The actual fixtures themselves are integrated. They are taken out each year and warehoused. The structures that we've proposed for the site, we'll warehouse them inside, so they receive minimal wear and tear in the winter.
Okay.
So a lot of that infrastructure, there's very little cost to maintain. So it's gaskets occasionally for something. When we bolt it back in, we might see a torn gasket at the start of a season or midway through, and then the chemicals. So it's the cost in the long run by going with the recycling system and the quality management system that we spec'd out reduces the overall needs.
Okay, great, thank you. Also, I don't know, Jim, I don't know if you'd have the answer to this, or Mayor. The design that we're set right now, is it being designed with a possibility of expansion at a later date, or is this going to be it? This is set. We don't know the answer.
I wouldn't anticipate that, just because of the concrete pour is, you know, the pad itself is probably the most expensive part of this. So the infrastructure, you know, your costs are, you know, underneath that concrete pad, the drainage, the electrical conduit, the plumbing, the rough plumbing. So once that pad is in place, and we did look at a larger footprint, that's the exorbitant cost. So it's highly unlikely you're going to.
That's why I asked the question, because I knew that. So I just wanted to make sure. So this is going. But I think it's a great idea, and I like how detailed and with the planning. And I know you guys kind of make sure you look at every possibility. So thank you.
Mr. Roman?
Sean, along with the cost of operating it, do we have any idea what the increased insurance cost would be?
Negligible. We checked with the JIF already. The JIF already has parameters for skate parks and other recreational items, which they routinely they come inspect, make sure it's in accord with their safety regimen. You know, one of the great things about being in the joint insurance fund is, you know, you don't face the private markets fluctuations or spikes. That is one of the really tremendous things about being in the Morris JIF and a implementation, just like implementation of Mount Playmore. We saw no increase, and here we one of the biggest parks in the county, and they just came every step of the way to make sure that we constructed it to a safe level, and that would be the case here as well.
Thank you.
Mayor?
We're saving about $22,000 a year by not running the beach program, which certainly offsets, number one, this year, the increased cost in terms of our capital outlay, and then probably on a going forward basis would substantially cover the cost of maintaining the facility.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mayor, is that $22,000 out of the
Oh, it's
rec?
$37,000 is what it costs us to run the beach. 15 in O&E, 22 out of the rec utility.
And does that come out of the general fund or recreation?
Both. 15 out of the general fund, 22 out of the rec utility.
Anything else?
That just brought up another question in my mind. Do we have plans of putting any of the costs associated with this into the recreation utility? Or are we going to keep it separate?
Right now, the plan is to cover it through the general operating fund. Obviously, the costs associated with the build are going to be O&E, are going to
Right.
be capital costs. But we'll take a look at the use of the facility. I think there may be opportunities for recreation to actually generate revenue through the project. There are summer camps that
Right.
might be interested in coming and spending money, which would help offset some of the recreation programs that we
Right.
do run. And I think the two together, between Mount Playmore and the splash pad, may make it a very attractive revenue source during the summer days for camps to come and use the facility.
Yeah, especially the other things that they have going on at the park with the camps. You know,
Yes.
it just, I think, I don't know if they still do, they had, the horses were up there at one time, Jill, do you still do that? When you have the horses come, or? No, okay, because I remember that was kind of cool, but that might be something to,
Come up.
Referring to the pony share program that we
Yeah,
used to do.
that
We
was
moved it down to Flanders Park because we used the secondary parking over on Hillside for that program. But the interest in it has not been as great, so we kind of like do it 1 year, then we wait 1 or 2 years and we reintroduce it to try and keep it interesting for people.
I see. Yeah, that was a really nice,
While Jill's up
program.
here, I'd like to put her on the spot for a second, because this is really something you and I haven't discussed. The overall project, the splash pad, do you see that as a success in Mount Olive? Do you see that as something that rec could ultimately build upon? What's your general feeling about this?
Well, I think splash pads are extremely popular. Looking around what's available in New Jersey, splash pads are mostly either in a city environment or they're part of an aquatic center. They're additional, something at Randolph, at Horseshoe Lake, other kinds of pools and things. Ours will be unique in that it's tied to the playground, and I think it'll really meet a need. We've noticed in all of our programming that we have a huge upswing in very young families. We call them the stroller crowd. And that is definitely part of the crowd that's going to be using the splash park. And the splash park's prime season is going to be when the sports fields are not primarily being used. You know, sports are heavily used in the fall and in the spring, and they finish up as school ends. And that's when summertime kicks in and it's warm enough to go do something like a splash pad. And that's when we're going to see all the activity for the splash pad is going to be during the summer and the winter, complementing the use of the park. So I don't see it being overwhelming use of the park.
Very good. Yes, Mr. Amianda?
Mr. President, I think, as I said, splash pad is good, but the timing is wrong, because I do not think that citizens of Mount Olive are ready to fund this project this year. And that's my comment on this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Jill.
We'd just like to get a straw poll as
Okay.
to
Yeah, we
council's-
can, it's for straw poll. Mr. Amianda?
No.
Ms.
Yes.
Lebo? Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
And yes. Thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Flanders-Drakestown Road Bridge.
Thank you, Mr. President. As council's aware, the County of Morris is going to be replacing the bridge over the Flanders-Drakestown Road near River Road. As part of that, there were some historic considerations. There was comment on this from the Historical Society. The county would like to put a kiosk at the location, but they can't due to safety reasons. So I forwarded to council some of the renderings from the County of Morris. They look very nice. They've certainly done their research. We vetted it by the Historical Commission, and they're in favor of it. Where they'd like to place it, and administration would concur, would be on the main courtyard coming into the township, on the walkway adjacent to the flagpole, on probably the right side. They were talking about with an eye on the left side at some point. Council may, at its desire, to put something else, prominent to the township or the history of township government or not all of itself onto the left side. But they plan on doing this regardless. If we got the okay, we don't need a resolution unless there's strong objection from council. They'd like to do that sometime between now and the end of summer when they plan on starting the activity on the bridge, unless there's opposition from council.
Mr. Amian?
I agree with the Historical Society that kiosks should not be placed near the bridge and near the school. I think I agree with them on those 2 points.
Anyone else? Everyone's okay with that? Then we're all good with that.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, we're going to go over budget items that were from the budget meeting carried over to these meetings to discuss further and see about adding back in to our budget. I believe, well, going in order for here, first up would be the police department.
Maybe I'll start off with a request that whenever I go for a budget item from now on, I'd like those 2 guys that came in here earlier and said they're going to save you money to go before me. That'd be nice to have.
Wasn't that several meetings ago?
Well, when I was here for budget hearing, a couple of things came up. I think Colleen brought it up originally, and the idea of adding some manpower to the police department was raised, and if that was to happen, what would we do with that, with the people person that we hired? Specifically, I talked a little bit to Joe about this by email to find out, are you looking for a description of what we would do by way of program, or are you looking to find out a little bit of a study on whether that's needed or not? I think Sean asked a little bit for a study, and you asked a little bit for the program. So I'm going to start with Captain Beecher, just kind of explaining how we go about, laying out the manpower needs that we have right now. So I'll just start with Steve, and then I'll comment a little bit on what we would do with regard to program. I originally, before Sean said keep it pithy tonight, I originally had a plan, a 2-phase plan, just to lay it out, where I'd add 1 police officer this year and 1 police officer next year. I'm going to talk only about 1 police officer this year because it just makes sense, because you're not talking about next year's budget now, you're talking about this year's budget. So I already cut it in half for you.
Everybody should have 2 pages of graphs regarding calls for service and officers. If you could reflect that or take a look at that as I'm talking. A little background on this. What we did is we took the International City County Management Association, which was founded 100 years ago, and they, since 2008, have had a Center for Public Safety Management. And that Center for Public Safety Management has studied 61 police departments since 2008, and they've come up with a recommended manner in which to evaluate your staffing. And it's a 2-pronged approach. The 1 prong is where you take a look at the people that you have and whether or not you're staffing them appropriately. So they have a rule of 60 where they recommend that 60% of your manpower be dedicated to patrol function, because that's the backbone of your police department. Those are the people that are responding to your calls for service. Presently, we have 65% of our officers dedicated to that. So the manner in which we dedicate our personnel is being done in accordance with the industry standard. The second rule of 60 they had is that has to deal with the amount of time that your officers are saturated with calls. And under our present system, our enforcer system, we couldn't pull out those statistics. But what I could pull out in terms, let me rephrase, in terms of the specific time that each officer is on a call, we couldn't pull that number out. But what we could pull out was the number of calls for service that our officers were on. So you'll see on the first page, calls for service per officer per year, 2003 through 2015. In 2014, it was the number of calls that a patrol officer typically handled during a 12-hour shift were 21 calls. Now, those calls for service were of three types. They were either self-generated, they were 911 calls, or they were calls that came in another manner. But still, over a 12-hour shift, our guys were handling 21 calls every 12-hour period. And as you can see below that, the number of officers that we've had have decreased since 2003 from when we had 50 to in 2014 we had 44. Presently we're at 46 with 2 in the academy, so we're at 48. So calls for services have increased since 2003. Total calls for service on page 2, you'll see that in 2003 we're a little at 32,000 calls for service per year, and in 2014 we were at 82,000. It's quite a significant jump. And the graph below that reflects the 911 calls for service the last 3 years. We've been at close to 9,000 911 calls a year that we receive at the front desk. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Roman?
Captain, what do you attribute the difference in numbers between calls for service of 82,000 in 2014 and 8896 911 calls? What is the remaining 70-some-odd thousand?
Well, some of that is an increase in officer activity. Like some of the things that we do now that we didn't do back in 2003, we do directed patrols. That's one of the things that if we see that there's a problem in an area of town, we want to direct our patrol officers to that, and we track that statistic. And what's happened over the course of the years is that the guys have been putting into the system pretty much everything that they do. And you know, that wasn't, we didn't have the same technology back in 2003 as we do now.
All right, so my alarm where I'm looking at the numbers, calls for service in 03 to 14 is mostly attributable to the way the information is gathered now and not an increase in crime.
No, our activities are increasing. Our activities are increasing.
I would say it's both. It's, you know, there's more directed activity, more officer self-initiated activity than there used to be. I guess I got that wrong. That's right. So I think it's both, Alec. It's a combination of both. The statistics should be fairly. When did we really start working in forces? 2003. So that's the beginning of measuring these. So at the beginning there was a little bit of a learning curve, but I think it's fairly consistent since then.
I'm done.
Other questions on that?
So essentially, you asked if. I remember when we had the reduction, and the mayor and I have gone back and forth on this before. We don't know what the number is, and I remember when we reduced it from 55 down, and I've told all of you that one of the things that I do regret is I regret removing the drug education program from the school system, and that's evident. It's not something that just Mount Olive did. When you look statewide, when you look nationwide, it's happening all over. It's all programs, all outreach programs have been reduced, and it was necessary. I mean, there was a shrinking economy, and we needed to react to that. But it's regretful. So, although I regret it, I believe it had to be done. It had to be done, and I think I told back then, I think I told the mayor that the number to keep the program was 51 officers. we argued then it could be 52. He could say it would be 48. It could be 52. But it's just both history and experience that has shown us that the number is it's higher than 48, which it is now. But I also promise you, no matter what you do today, I'm going to start working back towards having drug education in the school. And when I started to say nationwide, there's this, you know, there was a whole push towards community policing, being in contact with your citizens and all that, and then came the economy, and then everybody started moving away from that. And you can see the result in the news as to what happens when you don't have direct contact with your citizens in a positive way. And that's where we're going to go back no matter what. I think we need to add people to go back. And what I'm asking for this year is, as we discussed the other day, is to add a person as of July 1st. We put somebody in the police academy, unless they happen to be trained, you put them immediately out there on the road, and take somebody else and put them in a school format. My plan is to retrain the officers that are interested, that have formerly been trained as DARE officers. DARE is not going to exist I believe DARE is not going to exist in the very near future in New Jersey. There's been a move away from it according to the New Jersey State Chiefs of Police, and the reason for it is DARE New Jersey had a tested program that they were proposing. To make a long story short, there's a couple of different curriculums. In New Jersey, we now teach Too Good for Drugs. It's a replacement. Anybody that teaches DARE teaches Too Good for Drugs. It's a replacement from an old program that was Keeping It Real. The Keeping It Real program has not been tested. To the satisfaction of the New Jersey education environment. So in New Jersey, they're asking for us to teach a program that is tested and proven to work. That right now is the Too Good for Drugs program. Anybody that's been a DARE officer for us, they need to go for a one-day training, and they'll be qualified to teach Too Good for Drugs, which is what we're going to do. We're going to call it, it's going to be LEAD. That's the state title right now, which is Law Enforcement Against Drugs. Much like it used to be, we're going to put a police officer. My plan is to use a full-time police officer to manage the program, all 4 fifth-grade schools. Start teaching again in Sand Shore, Tintz, Chester Stevens, and Mountain View. And to also start doing a visitation program, much like the mayor described earlier, where we have an officer go from school to school. You know, if a special need is at one school 1 week, we spend more time there and move it around, and also be able to use that officer back on the road. The numbers that we came up with, I mean, they came basically from Sherry. It's about it's a half a year salary. If there are any hidden costs in there, it would be in pension, which is not in there, but typically that's not there the first year. Is that correct? So I think the numbers are representative of what we need, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, feelings, okay. What does the council feel, roughly, if we, about adding an officer? Mr. Rowe?
I mean, I think, I've always seen one of my primary purposes for being up here is to provide the basic services for the township residents, and Splash Pad is one of those great things. It adds great value to not only residents' well-being and enjoyment of the township, but safety, to me, is the paramount of what we do here, and I am in favor of adding this additional officer. I want to make sure that you guys have all the tools necessary to do your job properly and to keep us as safe as possible.
Ms. Lego.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, I'm very much in favor of this, and I'm absolutely thrilled that, you know, we're going to start having the officers communicating with the children in the schools. And I just want to ask you a question. When you say where the officers visit, it's not just going to be elementary, it's going to be middle school and high school as well. Is that part of your plan, or just I understand the program is 5th grade, but when they go to visit.
Much like the DARE program, the LEAD program it's the keeping it real. You can teach. I'm sorry, I always get these mixed up. The Too Good for Drugs program, which is what we'd be going with, you can teach that at all those levels. K through 8. You can teach at all of them.
No, but I
so
mean,
yes, so the answer is yes, we'll teach at the 5th grade. That's just,
Right.
I think that's the decision that I'm going to make, that we're going to teach at that core. It was successful in the
Yeah.
past. I think it'll be successful again. But the visitation would be to all the schools.
To all the schools. Thank
Right
you.
now, we have, as you know, we have Joe Kluska, who's a
Right.
special police
Mhm.
officer. He's stationed in the
Right.
in the high school. He's
Mhm.
essentially a security guard and not a DARE officer now.
Right.
So
Mhm.
now, whatever we could develop individual programs to visit any one of the schools, and so the answer is yes to all
Oh,
the schools.
wonderful. And the other thing, I know this is probably a very sensitive subject, but I was reading in the paper about in Sparta, they just saved another person's life on a heroin overdose, a second one in the past couple months, and I guess they had something like 13 of them last year, whatever. So what's the name of that new drug that they have?
Narcan.
Yeah, Narcan. And, you know, it's like really sad. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, it's like heroin and now all of a sudden it's back, and it's every time you turn around, you're hearing more and more about it. And I know we have issues with it as well. So I'm hoping that just making the connection with the students and the officer, that'll be a good influence. And I know, our officers are fabulous. So I think the kids really, relate to them right away. So I'm just hoping that might if it saves one life, it's worth it. Or if it makes...
It will.
Yeah.
I'm not
We
going
won't
to be
know
able to
about
identify
it.
who it is. But
No, we
it
won't
will.
know about it, but we'll, and it's just one of those things you have to have faith that that it's a good program and it's going to help. So thank you.
Yep, I agree. Mr. Amianda?
Mr. President, I support the idea of adding one more officer as requested.
Thank you. So going down the line, I guess a straw poll roughly. Ms. Laybow? Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrand?
Yes.
And yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
While we have you up there, the radar, while we're there.
Radar, I was a little confused after the last meeting.
Yeah.
I guess you were thinking that you could put that funding there,
Yeah,
but it's really
I
capital
was-
money.
Correct.
We have, you saw I think you saw what Mike Poquat came back with. There was a
Correct.
$25,000 expenditure.
Mhm.
Essentially, that's 5 different radar, five different units where you could see them. The only thing that I'm not completely convinced about in his plan is that there are 5 locations, and all 5 of them are Flanders locations.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I wanted to move it a bit. I think like the Sand Shore Road area, so it's just where they are, and we can move them along as we go on later. But he wanted you to get 5 different quotes, and the quotes are probably have to be re-upped right now, but it's essentially.
And I believe there's messaging on them now, too, he was saying. It's not
Yes.
only about speed limits, but we can send messages out to them, which I believe.
Yeah, he was looking for combined radar and message board, pole-mounted design, remote access, so that means that, there's information that's logged on there, the speeds and everything, where you could just log on with a computer and provide you with a traffic study, and what the differences are. Solar panel equipped, an alert system to notify us if there's a problem with the batteries, and that's kind of the things. Of all the different things, he looked at Decatur Electronics, All Traffic Solutions, Radar Sign, and Traffic Logics as vendors. And the one he's recommending is All Traffic Solutions, and they're about $5,000 a piece.
I'm a big fan of these, as you know, because helped me a lot on
Because we
Corey
got you
Road.
to slow down on Corey Road.
It slowed me down a lot, especially when I got stopped there after put up for the first time. But I'm a big fan of those over speed bumps and everything else we have in town, because those really deter. It makes people think about what they're doing.
Well,
I think that's great.
it's where they're the most effective, is like a Corey Road. Like Clover Hill, people speed on Clover Hill as much as we patrol there, but it's the size of the road. But that will slow you down, puts it into your conscious thought.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. It puts it right into your conscious thought, and you can't turn around. If somebody's yelling at you, slow down. You can't say, I am going slow, because it's right there blaring what your
I'm driving,
speed.
and I look at the thing, and if it starts blinking, I'm like, the chief can't speed, and I got to slow down. And
You got to slow down.
Always do it.
I saw you with your brake lights went on.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Those things, there's no way we can move them around, the 5 of them, because it's
some
pole.
of them, that's your question, right? Some of them are portable, and I don't know the answer to that, but that's one I would be hopeful for.
Yeah.
The problem with it is I've seen it with, we were originally going to plan that with Corey Road. The people on Corey Road probably wouldn't be very happy with that. So as you build it, you identify these typical speeding lanes like Clover Hill, I'd be afraid to move it from Clover Hill once
Right.
I put it there. But there are some, and I will look at that before I spend the money. I'll look at, maybe we'll get a combination of both.
Yeah, because
get a couple of portable, and is that what your question is?
Yeah, well, actually, do we need to put more money in if we're going to, I think portable units are actually the way to go. Gives you much more flexibility in terms of dealing with you and I both know when these concerns arise, and it's Clover Hill, it's Kevin Drive, it's Connolly Avenue, it's Sand Shore Road. If you get pole-mounted design, you're limited to those neighborhoods in particular. Much more in favor of portable units that we can deploy as needed based upon the concerns of the residents. Just like when we used to do those directed educational sessions when we had particular concerns in neighborhoods, like in my neighborhood in Flanders Crossing. And I think that that's a much more effective use of the machinery to get them all as movable units, put them out when they're needed, where they're needed, and be able to move them based upon.
I can update you with that, with if there's any change up or down for portable units. I worry a little bit about being too portable because somebody will come along and
Yeah.
and
We don't want them to walk.
but I'll look at that and let you know if it costs more or less. Is that
to know right away.
Yeah.
okay?
Do they have GP?
I'll go back now and look.
Well, it's okay if you get the answer by 11.
All right.
Do they have GPS?
Mike probably has the
Yeah.
answer, so it's just going there
Right.
and
Do they have
giving him
GPS on them, so if they do walk, we can find them? The other thing, I remember having a conversation with Officer or Sergeant Van Ness when he was here, and he really made a point that's so true. When you put up these signs, after a while, you just ignore the fact that, because you know it's there, but you just ignore it. So even, I would worry that even those speed limit, or people just might say, oh yeah, we got to slow. But if you move it to another street, it kind of like keeps people a little bit more alert. I don't know if that would work or not work,
Yeah,
but
I think to some degree that's true, but I know that every time I drive on
yeah, me
Gordon
too.
Road,
Yeah,
it brings my
yes.
attention to my speed.
It is so effective. It just, you're naming a couple streets. I could think of like 6 or 7 streets where they would really be beneficial, and unfortunately, it's just not in the budget to do that many. But I think, truthfully, I'd like to ask the mayor, and we'll find out the price. But 5, maybe we should go to a few more than 5.
I don't see that as
No?
I don't see that as a good expenditure, to be quite honest with you.
We'll try it out with
This is
5.
what you do. You get the portable units. When you move the unit, you just put up a sign that looks like a portable unit, says you're doing 35, slow down. And,
I'll
Sounds
get you,
good.
if there's a cost
Thank you.
difference, I'll get that within an hour.
yeah, there's got to be a
Thank
cost
you.
difference between the machines. It's got to be more expensive for the portable units, but I think it's much more effective and a better expenditure in the long run to have the portable units.
All right.
Thank you.
Is everyone in favor? Everyone in
Mhm.
favor of adding that?
Yep.
Anybody against? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next up will be the Bud Lake Fire Department.
So I ran out of money.
Good evening. Yeah, that's right. We don't have any of those signs either, so. I'm looking for a nominal increase, 3% increase in the working capital. As I said before, basically it's covering education. Education's become more and more expensive for us. Just alone, like the GEM-TAR certifications, $250 per firefighter. So it adds up quickly. We have a fair amount of young firefighters, about 8 to 10 of them right now. They're all looking to go for their level 2 certification. That's going to cost money. Basically, the way things are going now, we're going towards a pro board system at the academies, which allows your certificate to be used out of state, et cetera. That has added extra cost to the programs for education for firefighters. And really, education's a key for firefighting. They have an old saying, once you've learned it all, it's time for you to get out. So I try to keep education an important thing for us, having them learn more as far as becoming better firefighters and kind of better in serving the community. So that's why I'm looking for this nominal increase.
Any questions? Any?
It's 3,000. 668 is what you're asking
Yeah,
for?
3%.
We have a,
I'm in favor.
Mr. Amianda, are you in
Yes,
favor?
yes.
Ms. Laybach?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Roman? Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
And yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is, where was I on here? I'm sorry. Let's go down to the library, I believe, is up.
Good evening. Please excuse my supplies. I'm suffering a little bit of a cold this evening. When we met with you last time, we talked about a significant loss that we had suffered from our third of a mill assessment, which is based on not this past year, but the previous year's assessment. So at $51,000, which we lost, which is a significant amount of money to the library, significantly has affected our book budget. And it was suggested that perhaps maybe $10,000 would be awarded to us. And what we could do with that funds would be to increase the purchase of books for children and for our community. Thank you. That would buy about 500 books for our community, which is would be a wonderful thing. The library is an essential part of this community for a lot of reasons. People use it not only to take out a book, but they also use it weekly now to get help with their taxes. And it's really a wonderful program that we offer. The summer reading program is also essential for children, and that would be a wonderful funding of the books for that program as well. Summer reading is essential for our children to keep going with their skills over the summer. If they don't read over the summer, if they don't keep their math skills up over the summer, they lose it and they're behind. So we try to help with that. We support the schools in that as well. We also help our seniors and providing programs for them, specifically technology. Not all the seniors in our town know how to use an email program or know how to use social media that's so popular they can see their grandchildren's photos and join the rest of us in enjoying that as well. We also use it for other programs, which is, I'm just trying to think, early literacy, story times, those sorts of things. So we are asking for the $10,000, please.
Ms. Leyba?
Well, I wanted to find out what was going on with the library with your last, can we talk about that now?
I could talk now, or I was going to bring it up under administrative reports.
We can bring it up under administration.
I would like to really talk about it right now, only because, well, let me state my question. Last year, you part of your loss in revenue was based on what you went through last year, because you didn't have the revenue coming in from that direction, so you suffered a loss that way. And what I'm concerned about is how it's going to affect you this year, because here it's 2 years. Well, that's why I wanted to ask about it now, because I think it's kind of, germane to talk about it at this point.
We, Saturday morning, we experienced a flood. Sprinkler head burst due to the cold. And there are some silver linings with this incident. And one of those silver linings is that no materials were affected. No computers were affected. It's basically carpeting and sheetrock and some ceiling tiles. And so we were down for a much longer time period last time, and we met this morning with Sean and the DPW gentleman, and we are able to hopefully be open in 48 hours. So that's what we're counting on. That turnaround is fantastic. And I cannot thank enough the support of Sean and the team at the DPW. They are just fantastic, as well as the police officers that responded on Saturday morning. To be open again, perhaps on Thursday, Friday at the latest, that's great. We can still provide essential services to the community. So that will be a huge difference for us.
Overall, the credit goes to the mayor, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
If blame, you can blame Sean. But
Okay. All right. I'll do that. So that will make a difference. Absolutely.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, Mr. Amianda, are you?
Yes,
Strobel,
yes,
yes.
yes,
Ms. Leyba?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Flanders Fire Department.
Well, I'd like to see you guys shoot them down now.
I was going to start with, I hope your generosity hasn't run out.
I don't know if you want us to review, but basically we, if you remember from our last meeting that we talked about, we haven't asked for increase since 2000, or received one since 2012. We have become like I pointed out last time, we have become a warming center too, so we're increasing some costs there, and we've supplied a number of services to the town outside of what we would normally do and what we've done in the past. And just like Bud Lake said, our training costs are escalating, our NFP requirements and POSHA requirements are getting costly, more and more costly to sustain with, so that's why we're asking for the increase this year.
Any questions on that? Mr. Amianda, just roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Labow? Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
State your name for the record, please.
Chief Michael McDermott.
Thank you. What was after that? Oh, I'm in here. Flanders Rescue. Is that Flanders Rescue? Yeah. Or if
Hi, basically, we're looking for an increase due to defibrillator pad increase in costs and the use of having to carry Narcan along with the epinephrine pens, which expire each year. So the costs are great for that. So we're basically looking for more materials with some education.
State your name, please, for the record.
Sorry, Susan Scribner.
That's okay. Ms. Labow?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to mention, like I said before, when police were up at the podium with that Narcan, it's called, just, I mean, in the past couple months in one town, Sparta, they used it twice already. I mean, obviously there is a strong need for it, and a large expense is tied to it, but if it's saving lives, hopefully it saves lives, and it goes on to save lives. People change their lives for the better once they maybe have a scare like that. So I'm in favor of it, 100%.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else out there looking for money?
No.
While we're here. Thank you very much. Yep, we're on to, let me see, through the rest of the budget that we had to look at here. Are we approving the capital for the Bud Lake Rescue and that has to be, we
Yeah, they're
approve
here.
that as well? They're here, Bud Lake Rescue, okay. Because that's the capital one for that. I didn't see that.
After everyone leaves, can we talk about taking away the additional funding that you just gave to all the different groups?
Just state your name, please.
Cassandra Erickson, of Bud Lake Rescue. We requested an increase in our capital funding for the AEDs as we were doing a joint purchase with the fire department, which we needed 3 additional units, so we needed extra money. And the other request we had put in was for PPE, as we had anticipated getting that out of our reimbursables. However, now that we have to fix the light tower on our rescue truck at a cost of approximately $6,000 to $7,000, we needed to request a capital fund for the PPE.
So that's 13,000 total is what we're looking at here,
Yeah,
right?
capital.
Yes.
In the capital,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Any questions, or Mr. Amianda, are you in favor?
Yes.
Mr. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got everybody covered? I'm trying to see what else was here. Did we decide on the MOMAC restore funding to that? Was that part of, we didn't go over that, did we?
No, we haven't gone over it.
That
Or-
was,
There are 2 resolutions on tonight.
There are 2 resolutions for that tonight, so
yeah, I
we're
was gonna say, I
approving.
saw a resolution.
Okay, so we approve it through here, I guess. It was just on the here as the additional, so we'll do that one. The township clerk as well, I assume, we're all in favor of?
Right.
Okay, so that takes care of the budget items there on there. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 resolutions. Does anyone have any questions on resolutions?
No.
None? Yes, Sherry?
Can we just go back real quick, because we had storm control on here too, I just want to make sure.
Oh, where was it? I'm sorry.
Because
Yeah.
that's the biggest piece of this puzzle.
Which one was
That
it?
is
Storm
the
control.
Public Works storm control.
That number sort of is what it is,
Oh,
obviously,
storm,
so,
storm control.
yeah.
That's
we need to-
145.
Tim requested that we put the budget back to last year's
Oh,
levels,
on
plus
the-
another
okay.
20,000 for storm materials and plowing contractors.
Right.
So-
Obviously, and I had this discussion with Sherry today, that if we don't use the money,
Correct.
it goes into the storm utility, and we can adjust it next year.
Right.
Based upon what we have left over from this year. But what are you gonna do? You gotta, as Alex said, basic level of service that we need to provide, this is
Correct.
one of them.
Correct. So we're all fine, yeah.
Okay, just
Yep.
want to make sure everybody was on board with
Oh,
that,
yeah.
so.
Thank you.
I am for controlling the snow.
Sure.
If you,
Yes, Ms. Lehman.
Mr. Roman, if you figure out how to control the snow, would you please let the rest of us know?
I will.
Thank you.
Was there any questions on resolutions or anything on those? Nope. None? Seeing none, there's two ordinances here. Any questions on the ordinances? Seeing none? Mr. Roman?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Seeing none, any old business? None, any new business? Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, adjourn the public meeting, have a motion?
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's move on to that one now. Let me grab this one here. I got the revised one, I hope. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow.
Yes.
Mr. Mania. Mr. Perkins. Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mr. Nacastro.
Here. Mr. Amianda, would you move for the approval of the minutes from the previous meetings from February 3rd?
I make a motion for approval of minutes of previous meetings.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro.
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Can I ask for a deviation from the agenda? Joe is here to be sworn in on the
Oh, sure.
Environmental Commission. I don't know how much of a difference it's gonna make in
That's-
terms of timing, but.
That's fine.
If you wanted to call Joe up, he's being appointed to the Environmental Commission for a 3-year term to expire 12/31/2017, and Michelle is gonna swear him in.
Okay, great.
Don't swear at him.
Congratulations, why don't you come up? Michelle will swear you into the office. Thank you very much for the honor. Thank you for volunteering for the position, we really do appreciate it.
I'm going to go right at the podium.
Grab a microphone.
Lisa, can you come up and get a picture of Joe and put it up on?
Okay, you can place your right hand on the Bible. Raise your left hand and repeat after me, please. I, Joseph Pointek Jr.,
I, Joseph Pointek Jr.,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United
of the
States
United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New Jersey,
and the State of New Jersey.
that I will bear true faith
I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same
and allegiance to the same
and to the governments established
and the government established
in the United
in
States
the United States
and in this state
and in this state
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people,
and I will faithfully,
and I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly
and justly
perform all the duties
perform the duties
of the office of Environmental Commission Committee Member
Environmental Commission member
to the best of my ability,
best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
No problem. We have 12 pieces of correspondence. Anyone have any questions on those? Seeing none. We have ordinances for first reading with second reading scheduled for March 3rd, 2015. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2-2015, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, authorizing the conveyance of the deed of historic preservation easement to the Morris County Board of Chosen Freeholders for the property currently known as Block 7801, Lot 14, as the Mount Olive Bible Church. Mrs. Laybow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is it Baptist Church?
Is it the, that's a good question, let me see.
You said Bible Church.
Oh, I said Bible, Baptist.
Baptist,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
The new name was, I was thinking of the new one.
That's all. I just want to make sure.
Yep, thank you.
All right,
correct.
thank you. I move that ordinance number 2-2015 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 3rd, 2015 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 3-3015, ordinance reappropriating $82,728.09, proceeds of obligations not needed for their original purpose in order to provide for various recreation improvements in and by the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey. Noted the corrections in there. Mr. Ferrante.
Sure, I move that ordinance number 3-2015 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 3rd, 2015 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Just point of order, I don't know if it matters, we didn't do the council discussion. Not that I have anything to say on it.
Oh, yes, you're right.
So I
I
just want to
apologize.
make sure that there is no issues.
No issues on that? Okay. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 4-2015, the ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, to amend Chapter 211, Article 2, Section 211-15, entitled Placement of Material for Collection. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 4-2015 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 3rd, 2015 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of law.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 6-2015, refunding bond ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey, providing for the refunding of all or a portion of general improvement refunding bonds, Series 2005, sewer utility refunding bonds, Series 2005, the general improvement bond, Series 2006, appropriating $4,244,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of the Township of refunding bonds in the aggregate principal amount of not exceeding $4,244,000 for the financing cost of thereof. Mr. Ferrante.
Sure, I move that ordinance number 6-2015 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 3rd, 2015 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 7-2015, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, repealing Chapter 15 of the Mount Olive Township Code. Mr. Amianda.
I move that ordinance number 7-2015 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 3rd, 2015 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Fronte?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. We have 10 consent resolutions. Does anyone wish any to be moved to non-consent? Seeing none, anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, Mrs. Labow?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move consent resolutions 1 through 10.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
She said.
Oh, I didn't hear her. I'm waiting. Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Fronte?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. We have bill list, motion to be moved. Mr. Roman?
I'd like to move for approval of the bill list.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Fronte?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Administrative reports.
I have two things. Mount Olive Lions Club is having a pancake breakfast Saturday, February 21st from 8 to 10 at Applebee's. Worthwhile to go and support them. Also on Saturday, Cabin Fever Reliever is taking place at the Senior Center from 10 to 1. And last year they had over 800 people who attended Cabin Fever Reliever. And with the weather the way that it's been, I would expect that there's a lot of cabin fever happening. We should get a good turnout again this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, just two things. One, I want to touch upon the library, and I want to thank Lynn, who worked with her this morning, and I really want to single out Jim Lynch, John Geiger, and the police department, and commend Lynn for her foresight. One of the first things she had done was to ensure that the police department had key access. While we always had the knockbox to get in, or in the past the police can certainly force their way in. That foresight certainly paid off on Saturday because the police department was able to gain access in very short order, and we're on the phone with John Geiger, shut the water off, and that prevented probably thousands upon thousands of dollars of damage. There was still significant damage, but nowhere near what we had last year. The reason why we're a little more optimistic this year is we had a recovery, the Jif recovery vendor, come in right away to minimize the damage, but as a result of last year, there was some significant delay in that. At the time, the risk managers throughout the Jif kind of handled the claims and handled the payments, and that seemed to hold things up and added to the weeks upon weeks of the library being down. As a result of that, I was rather proud. I was able to serve on a committee with two of my colleagues, Bill Close of Sparta and John Reinhardt of Wharton, and we were able to pen out the white paper for the Jif of how to purchase and how to do a rapid response and how towns should appropriately respond and get buildings back in order, and that was disseminated out to Jif. We followed that blueprint for this event. So, in essence, the emergency that you saw in front of you today on the emergency resolution was basically to stop the bleeding. Today we met this morning. We had a bid out by this afternoon. It's going to be published in the newspapers. We plan on opening on March 3rd in the morning and having on for council approval that night. Now we have to do a bid for the subsequent reconstruction because it's no longer an emergency. That's why we're doing the bid. It's no longer an emergency purchase. However, our intent is to present council 2 weeks from tonight that bid and that reconstruction. The bid specifically states that they're to start within 3 working days of that award. So we're hoping by that week, March 6th at the latest, that reconstruction starts. That includes spackle and carpeting and ceiling tiles, and also within the bid, we're listing a demand that they be done within 21 days. So we're hoping far sooner than that the library will be up and running. But I wanted to congratulate the people that I mentioned. Good planning on Lynn's part and just a good reaction by our personnel. So that's we're much more optimistic this time around than last year. As far as the pipe goes, we're turning that over to Jif investigators. If there's a chance of subrogation, if there's some mechanical fault or something that was not done the way it's supposed to be, we anticipate the Jif would be seeking subrogation. The only other thing I have is GovDeals auctions. The vehicles and lots of equipment, it's all up on GovDeals. It started today. That auction, which is an online auction, I believe the mayor has it on his Facebook. It's on our website, or will be soon. as of today. That ends a week from today. On the non-vehicle equipment, the vehicles end on the 27th. So we're anticipating, some good response like we always do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any old business? Any new business? Any legal matters?
Thank you, Council President. Just one update to Council tonight with regard to the Paragon Senior Living Facility. As Council recalls, at the end of December, we approved the settlement agreement with the HMFA as well as the pilot agreement with Paragon Senior Living. At this point, there's just one condition precedent to the effectiveness of the settlement agreement with the HMFA, and that is that the closing take place with Paragon Senior Living. That closing was supposed to take place at the end of December. It's been kind of delayed. They're still finalizing the finance documents. I spoke to counsel for Paragon Senior Living this morning, and she assures me that she expects the closing to take place within the next 2-3 weeks. So at that point, I will update council on further matters.
Thank you very much. Council reports. Mr. Amianda, Board of Ed, anything?
No report.
Mr. Ferrante, anything on environmental, lake, or library?
Nothing.
Ms. Labow, seniors and economic and TNR?
Nothing.
Mr. Perkins is not here. Mr. Roman, anything on open space or rec?
No.
Okay. Board of Health is meeting tomorrow evening. Frank was sick. He just contacted me today. He's doing better. He was in the hospital, but he's doing better. Also, there was an article in the paper, which I wanted to commend the officers of, one of the officers from the health department. One of the massage parlors tried to bribe him with a bribe to keep him open without permits, and they obviously didn't take it, which is, just shows the caliber of people that we have in here. So,
Do we know the nature of the said bribe?
We know the nature of what?
$300
$300
gift card.
It was to a female employee.
That's what it was.
It's the wrong store, probably.
Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none. Council comments? Anyone have anything they'd like to say?
No, I think I put my.
You said enough. Do we have? Before we adjourn, we have to go into executive session. Mr. Ferrante, would you bring us into executive?
Sure. According to Section 7 and 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act, I make a motion we move into executive session to discuss personnel matters, noting that the minutes will be available upon conclusion of the issue.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Favor?
Aye.
And do we need no, we don't need a motion to come out of council?
Thank you.
You got that?
Adjourn.
Adjourn. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.